The late afternoon sun burned low on the horizon, its golden rays stretching across a narrow countryside road. Elliot Carrington, a man accustomed to boardroom meetings and polished skyscrapers, stood beside his silver Lexus, staring at the flat tire in dismay. The air was heavy with the scent of wildflowers and distant hay, but Elliot's mood couldn't have been darker. His tailored blazer was draped over the driver's seat, and his neatly pressed shirt clung to him in the summer heat. "No signal," Elliot muttered, holding his phone aloft in a futile attempt to find a bar of service. His brow furrowed as he glanced down the empty road. Not a car, not a soul in sight. Minutes turned into what felt like hours, and Elliot's frustration grew. Just as he considered walking to find help, a sound broke the rural silence, the faint hum of bicycle wheels on gravel. A teenager emerged over the crest of the hill, pedaling a weathered bike with a front basket dented from years of use. The boy, lanky and sun-kissed, wore a faded blue hoodie and jeans patched at the knees. The boy slowed as he approached, eyes scanning the car and then Elliot. "Need some help?" he asked, his voice casual but tinged with curiosity. Elliot hesitated. The boy couldn't have been older than 14, but there was something self-assured about his demeanor. "I've got a flat," Elliot said, gesturing to the car, "and no signal to call for assistance." The boy grinned faintly. "Lucky for you, I know my way around a tire. Do you have a spare?" Elliot gestured toward the trunk, watching as the boy leaned his bike against a tree and walked over. "Name's Sam," the boy offered as he popped the trunk open and began pulling out the tools. His movements were quick, efficient, hands steady as he worked. Elliot found himself oddly mesmerized, standing awkwardly to the side as Sam crouched by the wheel. "You've done this before?" Elliot asked, more out of politeness than genuine curiosity. "Plenty of times," Sam said without looking up. "Mom's car breaks down a lot. I've learned to handle things." In under 15 minutes, the flat tire was replaced, and Sam stood, brushing dirt off his hands. "All set," he announced, stepping back to admire his work. Elliot reached into his wallet and pulled out a crisp $100 bill, holding it toward Sam. "Here, for your time." Sam glanced at the money and shook his head, a polite but firm smile tugging at his lips. "I don't need it. Happy to help." Elliot blinked, the rejection catching him off guard. "It's just a thank you," he insisted. Sam's smile widened slightly, but he remained resolute. "You don't need to thank me with money. Besides, you're all set now." With that, he hopped back onto his bike, gave a small wave, and pedaled off down the road, leaving Elliot standing alone with his wallet still open and an odd sense of humility brewing in his chest. For the rest of the drive home, Elliot couldn't shake the encounter. Who was this boy? And why had he refused the money? Elliot sat in the study of his sprawling home, a glass of bourbon in hand, and his mind far from the stock reports he usually obsessed over. His house was immaculate, filled with modern art and designer furniture. Yet at that moment, it felt unusually cold. The boy's face lingered in his mind. Sam, he'd said his name was. There was something about the simplicity of his gesture, the quiet confidence he carried, that unsettled Elliot in a way he couldn't quite explain. The next morning, Elliot found himself driving back to the stretch of road where he'd met Sam. He stopped at a small gas station along the way, asking the clerk if they knew a teenager named Sam. "You mean Sam Johnson?" the clerk replied, squinting. "Lives up in Willow Creek, a few miles from here. Good kid. Always helping people out." Elliot nodded, jotting down the directions. He wasn't sure what he was looking for. Maybe closure, maybe answers. But something told him he had to see Sam again. Willow Creek was a modest, rural neighborhood nestled in the valley. The houses were small and weathered, surrounded by overgrown gardens and wooden fences that leaned precariously. Elliot pulled into the dusty driveway of a house that matched the description given to him. A small, single-story home with faded blue paint peeling from the siding. He hesitated for a moment before stepping out of his car. There was a quiet stillness in the air, broken only by the faint sound of chickens clucking in a nearby coop. As he approached the front porch, the door creaked open, and a woman in her late 30s appeared. She had tired eyes, but carried herself with a quiet strength. Her jeans and flannel shirt were smudged with dirt as though she'd been working outside. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone cautious but polite. Elliot cleared his throat. Good morning. My name's Elliot Carrington. I met your son, Sam, yesterday on the road. He helped me with a flat tire. The woman's expression softened. That sounds like Sam, she said with a faint smile. He's always lending a hand. I wanted to thank him properly, Elliot continued. He refused anything I offered, so I thought I'd stop by. The woman stepped aside, holding the door open. He's out back fixing the chicken coop. You're welcome to talk to him. Elliot stepped into the house, taking in his surroundings. The furniture was old but clean, and the walls were decorated with hand-drawn pictures, faded family photos, and small shelves of mismatched knickknacks. Despite its modest appearance, the home radiated a warmth Elliot found oddly comforting. He followed her through the kitchen and out to the backyard, where Sam was hammering a new plank onto the coop. The boy looked up, surprised to see Elliot. Hey, Sam said, setting the hammer down. What are you doing here? Elliot chuckled. I told you I wanted to thank you. Sam tilted his head, his expression a mix of amusement and curiosity. You drove all the way here just for that? Let's just say you left an impression, Elliot admitted. Sam's mother, who had followed them outside, leaned against the porch railing. Sam has a way of doing that, she said, a note of pride in her voice. He's always been the kind of kid who sees what needs to be done and does it. Elliot nodded, glancing between Sam and his mother. You've raised quite a young man. Rachel Johnson smiled faintly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. We do what we can. It's not always easy, but we make it work. Over the next hour, Elliot found himself sitting at the kitchen table, sipping coffee from a chipped mug as Rachel shared more about their life. Sam's father had passed away when he was a baby, leaving Rachel to raise him on her own. She worked multiple jobs to make ends meet, and while their life was far from luxurious, she took pride in the values she instilled in her son. Sam's always been a helper, she said, her voice tinged with both exhaustion and pride. He spends more time fixing things around the neighborhood than he does on himself. Elliot glanced at Sam, who was now perched on the edge of the table, sipping a glass of water. Why do you do it? Elliot asked. You could spend that time doing things for yourself. Sam shrugged, his tone casual. People need help. If I can give it, why wouldn't I? The simplicity of his response struck Elliot again. He thought of his own life, decades spent climbing the corporate ladder, focused on what he could gain rather than what he could give. Sam's selflessness made him feel both inspired and ashamed. Elliot began visiting Willow Creek more frequently, drawn by a growing curiosity about the community and its people. He learned that Sam's acts of kindness were far from isolated. The boy had become something of a local hero, fixing fences, helping elderly neighbors with groceries, and tutoring younger kids after school. But beneath the surface, Elliot saw the struggles the community faced. Many of the homes were in disrepair, and jobs were scarce. The local school was underfunded, and Rachel mentioned that the town's only clinic was on the verge of closing. You get used to it? Rachel said one evening as they stood on the porch, watching the sunset. People here are resilient. We take care of each other. Elliot nodded, but a knot of frustration formed in his chest. Why should they have to get used to it? He had the means to help, but he hesitated, unsure of how to approach it without overstepping. One day, while walking with Sam through the town, Elliot noticed the boy's fascination with a construction site. Sam's eyes lit up as he watched workers measure and cut wood, their movements precise and coordinated. You like this kind of stuff? Elliot asked. Sam nodded. I want to be an engineer someday. Build things that last. Elliot smiled, an idea forming in his mind. That evening, he made a few calls to old colleagues in the construction industry. If Sam wanted to build, Elliot would find a way to make it happen. Over the next few weeks, Elliot began laying the groundwork for a larger plan. He worked discreetly, coordinating with local businesses and organizations to bring resources into Willow Creek. He funded repairs for the school, arranged for the clinic to remain open, and donated supplies to help residents fix their homes. When Rachel found out, she confronted him, her tone firm but not unkind. Why are you doing all this? Elliot looked her in the eye. Because your son reminded me of something I'd forgotten, that we're all connected, and when one of us helps, we all rise. Elliot's efforts began to bear fruit in Willow Creek. The once dilapidated community started to come alive with activity. Volunteers from surrounding areas joined in, inspired by the sudden influx of resources and support. Sam watched with amazement as old homes were patched up, the school received new books and supplies, and the clinic's grand reopening was announced. But what truly caught his attention was a surprise waiting for him one bright Saturday morning. Elliot had arranged for a small construction crew to set up a makeshift workshop behind the Johnsons' house. There, Sam could learn basic engineering and construction techniques. The foreman, a gruff but kind man named Joe, greeted Sam with a handshake. "Your friend here told me you've got an eye for building," he said, nodding toward Elliot. "Let's see what you can do." Sam's face lit up with excitement. Over the following weeks, he spent every spare moment in the workshop, learning how to use tools, read blueprints, and calculate measurements. Elliot often joined him, their bond growing stronger with each shared lesson. "You know," Sam said one afternoon as he measured a piece of wood, "I didn't think someone like you would care about a place like this." Elliot paused, leaning on a workbench. "Someone like me? You've got everything," Sam replied matter-of-factly. "Money, a big house, fancy car. Most people who have all that don't look back." Elliot smiled faintly, the boy's words cutting deeper than Sam likely realized. "I've had those things for a long time," Elliot said, his voice quiet, "but none of it ever felt as real as this." Just as things seemed to be improving, trouble came to Willow Creek in the form of a developer looking to buy up land for a luxury resort. The plans threatened to displace many families, including the Johnsons. Flyers and letters began appearing in mailboxes, offering buyouts that barely covered the cost of relocating. Rachel was furious. "They're trying to push us out," she said, slamming the flyer onto the kitchen table. "This town is all we have." Sam looked to Elliot, his usual calm replaced by visible anxiety. "What can we do?" Elliot leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. He had dealt with developers like this before, men who cared more about profit margins than the people their projects affected. "We'll fight it," he said firmly, "but we'll need a plan." Elliot worked tirelessly, using his connections to gather support. He organized town meetings, helping the residents of Willow Creek understand their rights and options. Sam and Rachel became key figures in the effort, rallying neighbors and collecting signatures for a petition to block the development. During one meeting, Sam stood in front of a crowded room, speaking with a confidence that surprised even himself. "This town isn't just land," he said. "It's people, it's memories. If we let them take it, we lose more than homes. We lose who we are." The room erupted in applause, and Elliot couldn't hide his pride. Sam's words carried a power that resonated deeply with everyone present. The fight eventually led to a hearing at the county courthouse. The developers' team argued that the project would bring jobs and revenue to the area, while Elliot and a pro bono lawyer he'd hired countered with evidence of the harm it would cause to the community. Sam sat in the front row with Rachel, his hands clenched tightly in his lap. When Elliot took the stand to speak, his voice was steady but impassioned. "This isn't just about profits," he said, addressing the panel. "This is about preserving something money can't buy, a community's spirit and identity." After hours of testimony and deliberation, the panel voted in favor of the town. The development plans were halted, and Willow Creek was spared. The victory was celebrated with a town-wide gathering. Elliot, Sam, and Rachel were the guests of honor, though Elliot insisted the credit belonged to everyone. Standing near the bonfire that night, Sam turned to Elliot. "I don't know how we would have done this without you." Elliot smiled, placing a hand on the boy's shoulder. "You would have found a way. You've got more strength in you than you realize." Rachel joined them, her eyes glistening with gratitude. "You've given us more than just a home, Elliot. You've given us hope." Months later, Elliot launched a foundation dedicated to supporting small communities like Willow Creek. The foundation provided grants, resources, and mentorship programs to help towns thrive without sacrificing their identity. Sam continued to pursue his dream of becoming an engineer, eventually earning a scholarship through the foundation. On the day he left for college, Elliot was there to see him off, his heart swelling with pride. "You're going to do great things." Elliot said as they shook hands. "So are you?" Sam replied, grinning. "We both will." Years later, Sam returned to Willow Creek as a successful architect. The first project he undertook was designing a new community center, a symbol of the town's resilience and unity. Elliot, now retired for good, watched from the sidelines, content in the knowledge that his life had taken a meaningful turn. He had found not only a purpose, but a family in the most unexpected of places. The ripple effect of one small act of kindness had transformed not just a town, but a man's entire worldview. And for Elliot Carrington, that was the greatest success of all.